Go. So let's begin with 3 conscious breaths. And inviting the birds to join us. Just take a deep in breath. Shanti, shanti, shanti. I have a cassette tape where Satchidananda leads a group down in Yogaville in what's called satsang, which is a little talk. He gives a little talk. And he opens the talk by making the sound of Om and saying Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Somehow every time I do that, I hear the echo of him doing it. He had such a particular way of saying Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amazing man. So the energy just comes right through.
It must come through from you too, Steve, because I've done ohms and other circumstances, but when you do it, it's different. There's something that comes through that's just a little bit more peaceful, just a little bit more powerful. So thank you for that.
Maybe it's the voice of Satchidananda through me.
It could be. I mean, yeah. You're holding it there.
Yeah. Who knows? Anyway, we have an interesting session today. We've been talking and studying and conversing about our I consciousness. And today we're going to go a little extra deep, so it should be fun. Let's see if I can start the screen share now. There it is. Here we go. Does everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Second tier circle. I got the date right, June the 7th. No Religion by Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. Our study is how to achieve a void mind. And there's a short verse which we've been talking about. Do work of all kinds with a mind that is void. And to the voidness surrender all of the fruits. Eat the food of voidness as the holy ones do. The holy ones are those who are in the process of letting go attachments and selfishness. So we're included with the holy ones. You'll have died to yourself from the very start. You'll have died to your lowercase self, SELF, from the very start. That's the one we're going to look at today. The fourth and final, most important line of the verse is, you'll have died to yourself from the very start. So let's take a look at that and talk about some of the implications of it. And then I prepared a little exercise for us to delve deeper than we delved before into this idea of our self, our I consciousness. You'll have died to yourself. This means that when we re-examine the past and reflect upon it with clarity and with insight and with wisdom, we will know for a fact that there never was a person or individual. A person is an idea. Individual is an idea. When we look upon the past with clarity, we see that that idea of a person or individual may have been present as a thought, but there never was a person or individual. What was there? We will see that there are only the basic processes of life, the senses, we sense things, the elements which we experienced, and the natural phenomena. That was our experience. Even the things we had previously clung to as existing no longer exist. Things we have clung to, ideas in our heads. There were only basic processes of life which we experienced, our senses, the elements, and natural phenomena. This I, this ego, is just a mental concept. This is a big one. This I, this ego, we've had an I for a long time in our life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a mental concept that we got, a thought in our mind with lots of baggage attached to it, a product of thought. So noticing that this I or ego, or being willing to entertain the fact that this I is just a product of thought, is a little step in taking us away from our attachment to having an I and an ego. There's nothing substantial or permanent upon which it's based. The I, nothing substantial or permanent, just those sensations that we experienced all our life. And then we got that idea that there's an I. There is only an ever-changing process flowing according to causes and conditions. There's only an ever-changing process flowing our ongoing experience according to causes that are there and the conditions we experience. But ignorance misconstrues this process to be a permanent entity, a self and an ego. Don't let thoughts and feelings based on I and mine arise, he advises. We can take a further step back. All of the things with names in life we experience as permanent entities. So, for example, a chair, something very simple, a chair. We experience a chair or a star as a permanent entity. And is it? Or is it just, do we just have an idea that there's a permanent thing out there called a chair or a star? Or do we just have experiences associated with chairs and stars? We may all know the story about how many blind men was it who tried to describe an elephant? And the guy that touched his tusks gave a different description than the guy who touched his tail or the guy who touched his leg. So we have our experience, and then we abstract that into things. Chairs, experience of chairs. Depending on the country we're in, we may all have a different experience of what a chair is. Our experience of stars may even be different. In the old days, many years ago, maybe even still today, some people experience the stars as gods or as holy, and saw gods represented symbolically in the stars. So they were things. Same thing is true with ourself or our ego. We have experiences associated with the self and an ego, and we therefore abstracted to be a permanent entity. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a process of experiences which we and others agree with us is a permanent thing, a self and an ego. And although it's certainly useful, now the concept of things, in science, when there is a thing that someone discovers, publishes a paper about it, the idea is that different scientists independently make studies of that thing, that abstract thing. And if everyone agrees that the thing is as described, then the scientists all agree, yeah, it's real, and we accept it as a thing now in our life. Through observations and through a lack of negative observations that conflict with the consensus. Anyway, this idea of self and ego can get us into trouble. So the Buddhists recommend don't let thoughts and feelings based on I and mine arise. Well, now we need to know how to do that. I'm going to exercise pretty soon where we can practice it and see what works for us. All pains and problems will end, Buddhadasa says, right there and then, if we don't let the idea of I and mine arise. So that the body, our human life, becomes insignificant, no longer a cause of worry. Pains and problems will end so that the body, my body, this body is mine, my life, I have a human life, becomes insignificant. In other words, the idea of it becomes significant. And the idea of it is no longer a cause of worry, because we've made ourselves some distance between the I and the mind. I think we're getting close to our little exercise. Well, first we need some background. So here we go. Human life is merely a collection of 5 aggregates, which are called khandha, functioning according to causes and conditions, pure in its own nature. So we're going to look at what the 5 aggregates are that make up a body, a human life. And then we're going to see how each one functions just according to natural causes and conditions, and how each of those 5 aggregates that constitute who we are in its own nature is pure and doesn't have any this idea of selfishness or attachment. All right, shall we look at what the aggregates are, which are called khandha? I see heads nodding. Yes, here we go. Khandha. Khandha. The 5 basic subsystems which make up human life. Number 1, the body. Makes sense. Number 2, our feelings. This is not the feelings of, I feel like going for a walk. No, these are feelings that we experience, our joy and sadness, our anger, our joy. Perception, what we perceive. For example, we perceive experiences and extract them as things and permanent. That's what we perceive, our perceptions.
Hello.
And then
You can't come to the phone right now. Please leave your name and telephone number and repeat your phone number twice. So we're sure to get it. Thank you.
If you did not receive your video link, please call our office at 703-87.
I received the video link, so I hung up on that call. Well, it's nice to have a little distraction now and then, so it doesn't get too heavy.
Sure.
So here we go. What's the subsystems which make up our human life? The body, our feelings, perceptions, thoughts, the thoughts, which just seem to pop up sometimes on their own, and sometimes we think thoughts. And finally, consciousness itself. Just the experience of being present, being here, being alive. Body, feeling, perception, thought, consciousness. I'm thinking there are other traditions that hold the human body is made up of different things, but these 5 work fine. We can use these 5. So these are the 5 things which make up our human experience. And we're going to use these 5 in a little exercise. Help us get some separation from our ego. Human life is merely a collection of those 5 aggregates, the khandha, each functioning according to causes and conditions, each pure in its own nature. We need to look at that for ourselves, and that's what we're going to do. These 5 aggregates, our component processes of life, are naturally free of attachment and selfishness. Each of these aggregates are naturally free of attachment and selfishness. The body, free of attachments and selfishness, our perception, thoughts, consciousness. Well, we need to look deeper and see if that's true. Then he goes on to say, as for the inner aspect, those habits of desire and selfishness, try to do without them. So try to do without the habits of desire and selfishness as we experience each of our human subsystems. So shall we try to give it a try? He says, keep striving to prevent them from being born until the selfishness has no more opportunity to pollute the heart. In this way, we force ourselves to die. This is the Laura self. So by striving to prevent our selfishness, attachments from being born, then the selfishness has no more opportunity to pollute the heart or to put a veil over the way we experience life, to put a filter over the way we allow our heart to experience life by preventing selfishness. And in this way, we force ourselves to die, which is what the little verse is that he is trying to describe here. That is, we die through the elimination of polluting selfishness. We die through the elimination of polluting selfishness. Okay, is everyone willing to die by eliminating polluting selfishness? The affirmations that I have prepared are a little bit long. And I think I have 5 or 6 of them, one for each of the 5 or 6 components of khandha. So I'm going to suggest that to do the exercise, I repeat them out loud, you listen to them, and then you repeat them silently to yourself 2 times, just to see how they land with you. Shall we put ourselves in exercise mode?
Mm-hmm.
Take a deep centering breath. Be sure our feet are on the floor in touch with Mother Earth. And notice our hands, where our hands are. Sometimes it's useful to turn the palms upward to be in a receptive mode with our hands. So I'll begin by repeating, and then you repeat to yourself twice. My human life functions according to causes and conditions. It is pure in its own nature. Silently to yourself. My life is naturally free of attachments and selfishness. Repeat twice to yourself. My human body functions according to causes and conditions. It is pure in its own nature. Twice to yourself. My body, my human body, is naturally free of attachment and selfishness. My human feelings function according to causes and conditions. They are pure in their own nature. My feelings, my human feelings, are naturally free of attachment and selfishness. My human perceptions function according to causes and conditions. They are pure in their own nature. My perceptions are naturally free of attachment and selfishness. My human thoughts function according to causes and conditions. They are pure in their own nature. My thoughts are naturally free of attachment and selfishness. My human consciousness functions according to causes and conditions. It is pure in its own nature. My consciousness is naturally free of attachment and selfishness. I prevent habits of desire and selfishness from being born. Selfishness no longer pollutes my heart. I'm pretty sure this is the end of the exercise I prepared. Or that the good Lord prepared through me. Since there's not an I that could do it. The exercise that came from me, even though there's no me. We need to talk about that business of how we communicate with our I's and me's. Any observations or questions before we move on?
One quick question, Steve. When we say, I prevent habits, my mind wants to jump in and says, the habit's already there. And how do I? Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do we, just become self-aware? I think it's one of the very first steps, is just noticing. Right? And from that self-awareness, maybe perhaps it's the internal need to accept and be with and befriend versus kind of pushing away or, just a thought.
Sounds like a good approach to make friends with your habits of desire and selfishness. And take a step back from, for some reason, an image.
Right. Yes, go ahead.
Right. It's part of who we are, so we make friends with who we are. We accept the aspects of ourselves that we experience as who we are. And just by doing that, we have removed ourselves slightly from those aspects of who we are so that they don't own us so much. And we can be in a position of an observer of how we are, our history. I think this verse here is talking about new habits. I prevent habits of desire from being born.
Oh, I got you. Okay, that makes sense.
There's a lot of them that are alive. Those babies are alive and well, and they grew up. But what about bearing new ones? This interesting image came to my mind. I have a watering can on my patio, which I use to water my tomato plants. And I have it positioned right underneath a place on the eaves where water drips down. So magically, whenever there's some rain where the water drips down and fills up this watering can. And when it gets filled up, it overflows. So I look at preventing habits of desire and selfishness from being born as taking that watering can away from that place where drip, 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 new habits of desire and selfishness get born. And then we can take that watering can, which is full, as you pointed out, Sam, make friends with it, and use that water to water our tomatoes. Make good use of it. And then when one day the bucket is empty or getting empty, that's fine too. We had a full bucket of selfish desires, and one day the bucket is only half full. It's a process, isn't it? So new selfishness no longer pollutes my heart. The old selfishness I'm just going to pour away as the occasion arises. Even though they may return after I poured it out, I'll pour it out again.
Yeah.
Wonderful observation.
And with the statements that you're making in there, especially talking about, I think, emotion, about it being pure, when you see that, you notice how much desire and selfishness is already in there, because the statement sounds like a lie to yourself, to me, to my experience. And so it's a place to start to examine what you got going and see how much is already in there. And if you might want to choose to shuffle some of that off.
Right. So if something didn't land with you that you repeated yourself and seemed like you were lying to yourself, great. That's grace bringing you an area to take another look at.
Mm-hmm.
See what's going on. Good observation. That's the purpose of these exercises, I think. Some just land like, yeah, that's true. And some land as, well, that's not really true for me. That feels like I'm not telling the truth to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's grace speaking, and an opportunity to wrestle with that and allow it to come up again so the new light can be shed on it. And maybe there's something that you're needing to see that you haven't seen yet. So having the patience to wait for it to come up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Wonderful observation. Any others before we go on? Not good. I nailed the end of the exercise. Not having an ego. So now let's look at some techniques of being in the world while having this spiritual awareness that we've practiced through the exercise, not having an ego. There are consequences of not having an ego, of not having I and mine in the mind. So assuming we have some success separating ourselves from I and mine, in the mind there are consequences. What are they? Outwardly, we may say I and my according to social conventions, but don't let them exist in the mind or heart. This, I think, is one of the most important lessons he's got to tell us. Outwardly, we're going to say I and mine, just as I said I prepared this exercise and my exercise, because according to social conventions, that's how we communicate. But in my heart and in my inner mind, can I not let an I exist that created this exercise? have this exercise come about through what the natural processes are. I was going to say who I am. What the natural processes are. What the nature things are. So somehow I've weakened this I and my that did it. No, it wasn't me that created the exercise. It came through the confluence of nature acting through me. Oh, there goes the me again. So that's our social conventions. Somehow to use I, my, me, and mine, but not letting them have a permanent existence in the mind or the heart. As St. Paul said, let those who have wives live as though they had none. So you're not going to tell the neighbor, that's not my wife. No, you will. You don't want your wife getting angry at you. Say, wait a minute, if I'm not your wife, who is? Here's some other woman you're.
Yeah. But not being attached, yeah.
Here's some other woman you're sleeping with. What if the neighbor like this? Those who have wives live, in other words, in the inner heart, as though they had none, not attached to it. And those that mourn as though they weren't mourning. Step back from the mourning and notice that the body is mourning. The body is mourning. The feelings are mourning. Thoughts are mourning thoughts. There's perception of something to mourn about. And there's a consciousness of being in a state of mourning. By separating ourselves from the mourning, we can mourn perhaps more effectively than those that perhaps resist mourning. We're fully into it. It's just not who we really are. It's rather an aspect of us. And those who buy as though they had no goods. So you go to the store, you get the food, you buy the new Toyota from Sam. Hope it's not today, Sam. Take that Toyota home. But as if we don't have any goods. It's just the natural processes taking place. We'll tell other people, oh, that's my car, my new car. Sam sold it to me. He did a good job. I was going to get one, but then we had to talk about it, and I realized this is the right one for me. I'm grateful to Sam. Thank you, Sam, for having done such a great service to me. So happy I didn't go with my natural reaction, and now I'm really happy. So that's what you tell the neighbors, but it's not yours. It's just the natural processes. Externally, we should behave the same as others do. Eat like they eat, work like they work, and speak like they speak. No difference. Speak in their people language. Remember I said there's two kinds of language, the Dhamma language and people language. So we speak in the people language. It's that Dhamma language inside us where there's no I and mine. Speak in the people language. This is my house. This is mine. It's not yours. There's nothing wrong in using these words when necessary, but don't let the mind or the heart fall for them. That's the advice. Go back to the meditation that we went through today and notice that our experience of ourselves, our body, our perceptions, our feelings, our thoughts, sensations, consciousness, we can experience them as being without attachment, without selfishness, and being pure. Even our thoughts, even thoughts which seem selfish thoughts, we can take a step back from those thoughts and see, well, that's just a pure thought, as long as I don't buy into it. Don't buy into it. So don't let the mind fall for them in a sense means don't let that deep inner consciousness fall for them. Sometimes the mind will have a mind of its own and think this thought and that thought, come up with a selfish thought or attachment. So maybe don't let that inner consciousness, that deeper part of us, fall for them. Leave such words on the outside, so to speak, and try not to let them into the mind. When they come into the mind as thoughts, try and step back from them so they don't reside there and get stuck there. In other words, don't believe them. You're going to speak them, but you're not going to believe them. We ought to train ourselves this way. That is, mouth is one and mind another. The mouth says one thing, but the heart knows otherwise. Any comments or observations or questions about these teachings?
I like this particular slide in the sense that when we choose the words, or sometimes it's not often the case, it's habits. And I might say yes or I might say no, for example, but it's not speaking the actual felt sense of the heart space. And I think sometimes words quite can't express the feeling body sensations from the heart. And so I think it's just maybe perhaps if I can, or as a society, if we can learn to grow and say the sound as opposed to the words. That makes sense?
Say it again.
So expressing the vibration energy, the felt sense of the heart space, like animals do, as opposed to the words. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think what I'm trying to say is I think the heart has a way to express itself, like you mentioned, mourning. Many of us don't want to go there. And I think the heart space needs to have the safety and the support to be able to express the sadness or the depth of moment to moment joys and sadness and everything in between.
Yes, I got it. Can we, when the occasion arises, mourn, not resist mourning, and mourn fully? Mourn more fully than we ever thought we could. And by removing any resistance to mourning and letting it totally flow out, can we allow somehow ourselves to notice that we are doing that full mourning?
Yeah.
There's a part of us that notices the feelings, the tears, the body, the convulsions are totally engaged in mourning. And yet there's a little part of us that's knowing that and observing that, not attached to it in the sense that I'm going to be mourning forever.
Right.
As long as I live. No, allowing the process to complete itself.
Yes.
So that it can be fully expressed, every aspect of it, nothing held back. And in this way, the mourning is complete.
Yeah.
So that part of you that's noticing the mourning can look back at it another time and in a certain sense can say, well, I wasn't mourning, not in my heart. That was my body mourning, my consciousness mourning, my perceptions mourning, my feelings mourning, mourning thoughts. but in the deepest sense, not who I am. So you fully experience life, more fully than you can imagine, and yet a part of you is just noticing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way that religions teach us to be in association with God, to love God with all your soul, with all your heart and all your mind. And when, which I don't profess to do, but according to the scriptures, when you can do that, love God in that way, you are the vibrations of love and have the most loving relationship with those around you because you're coming from that source. I think we need to close now. Any final observations before we close today?
That was very rich. Thank you.
Was. Thank you, Steve.
Shall we take 3 deep breaths together? And with a deep in breath. Shanti. Shanti, Shanti. Well, hello, Della. I see you there. I'm glad you were able to join us today. You're all muted. Hey. Well, folks, it's been real, so I have it about 10-2.
Have a good day, everybody.
I've enjoyed
You
being
too.
with you so much. I look forward to seeing you again. God bless.
Thank
Bye.
you, Steve. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
week.
Bye.